Commander Vextari watched his world burn from the bridge of his ship. The beautiful crystal towers of Zelani Prime were falling one by one under the heavy guns of the Korath Empire. Red flames danced across the surface of his home planet, and black smoke rose into the sky like angry fingers reaching for the stars. "Sir, we lost contact with the Fourth Fleet," reported his communications officer, her blue skin pale with fear. "The Korath broke through our outer defenses. They are heading straight for the civilian sectors." Vextari closed his 3 eyes and tried to think. His people had been peaceful for over 1,000 years. They built things instead of destroying them. They made art and music instead of weapons. The Korath were different. They lived for war and conquest. They killed for fun. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked. 12, sir. Maybe 15 if we count the damaged ones." The Korath had brought over 200 warships to his system. Each one was twice the size of his vessels and covered in thick armor. Their hulls were painted blood red, the color of death and destruction. The Korath warriors inside those ships had sharp claws and harder shells than any armor his people could make. "Send a message to the Murdor Republic," Vextari ordered. "Ask them for help." His officer worked at her station for several minutes. When she looked up, her face was sad. "They say they cannot help us, sir. The Korath are too strong. They do not want to risk their own people." Vextari felt his heart sink. The Murdrul were good people, but they were also careful. They would not fight a battle they could not win. "What about the Thornery Union?" "The same answer, sir. They say the Korath Empire is too dangerous." More explosions lit up the planet below. Vextari could see Korath landing ships dropping toward the surface like deadly rain. Soon, his people would be slaves, or dead. The thought made him sick. "Sir," his science officer called out, "there is an old emergency signal in our computers. It was left by the First Federation, from before we joined the galactic community." "What kind of signal?" "A distressed beacon. It sends a call for help to anyone in space who can hear it. The old records say it reaches very far, even to unknown systems." Vextari thought about this. The First Federation had been destroyed long ago by some forgotten war. Their technology was old but powerful. Maybe, just maybe, someone would hear their call and come to help. "Do it," he said. "Send the signal." The science officer pressed several buttons on his control panel. Deep inside the ship, ancient machines came to life. They had been sleeping for 1,000 years, waiting for this moment. The beacon began to broadcast across space, carrying a simple message. "Help us. We are dying. Please come." The signal traveled faster than light, jumping from star to star like a stone skipping across water. It reached the peaceful Myrtle first, but they had already said no. It found the plant-like Thornery next, but they were too afraid to answer. The gaseous Veilmoth received the call, but decided they could not help either. The signal kept traveling, moving away from known space, into the dark areas where few ships ever went. It passed dead worlds and empty systems. It crossed the void between galaxies. Most species would have given up hope by now, but the beacon kept calling. Finally, after traveling for hours, the signal reached a small space station orbiting a yellow star. The station was ugly compared to most galactic buildings. It was made of gray metal and sharp angles. No pretty curves or glowing crystals. Just hard, practical surfaces designed to last. Admiral Jack Morrison was drinking coffee in his office when the signal arrived. The coffee was black and bitter, just like he liked it. He had gray hair and deep lines around his eyes from years of war and worry. His uniform was clean but worn, like a tool that had been used many times. "Admiral," his aide knocked on the door. "We are getting a strange transmission." "What kind of transmission? A distress call, sir?" "But not like any we have seen before. It is very old technology, but the signal is strong." Morrison put down his coffee and followed the aide to the communications room. The technician there was a young woman named Kelly Wright. She looked excited and confused at the same time. "Play it for me," Morrison said. The message filled the room. It was not in any human language, but the computer translated it quickly. The words made Morrison's blood run cold. A peaceful people were being destroyed by an aggressive empire. Innocent civilians were dying while their protectors fell one by one. "Where is this coming from?" Morrison asked. "The Zalani system, sir. About 40 light-years from here. Our long-range sensors show massive energy signatures. Looks like a full-scale invasion." Morrison studied the star charts on the main screen. The Zalani system was far from human space, but not impossible to reach. He had 12 ships in his fleet, all designed for deep space combat. They were not the biggest ships in human space, but they were tough and well-armed. "Kelly, get me a connection to all ship captains. Emergency conference, in 10 minutes. "Yes, sir." Morrison walked back to his office and opened his safe. Inside was a thick manual with red letters on the cover, Emergency Response Protocols. He had hoped he would never need to use it, but today was different. Today someone was calling for help, and humanity had always been good at answering such calls. The conference room filled up quickly. 12 ship captains appeared on the screen, all looking serious and ready for orders. These were good people, Morrison knew. They had all volunteered to serve in the deep space fleet, far from Earth and family. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison began, "we just received a distress call from an unknown species. They are being attacked by what appears to be a hostile empire. The situation is urgent." Captain Lisa Hayes of the UES Reaper spoke first. "How far, sir?" 3 days at maximum speed." "Do we know anything about the attackers?" "Not much. But from the energy readings, they have a significant fleet. This is not a small raid. This is conquest." The captains looked at each other through their screens. They all knew what this meant. Humanity had rules about this kind of thing. When innocent people called for help, humans answered. It did not matter if the people were human or alien. It did not matter if the fight was dangerous. It mattered that someone needed help, and no one else would come. "Orders, sir?" asked Captain Tony Chen of the UES Devastator. Morrison smiled. It was not a happy smile, but it was determined. "Prepare your ships for combat operations. Full weapons load, all Marines ready for deployment. We leave in 2 hours." "Sir," Captain Amy Foster of the EU's Thunderbolt raised her hand. "What if this is a trap?" "Then we spring it together," Morrison replied. "But I do not think it is." That signal was real desperation. Someone is dying out there, and they need help. We are going to give it to them. The meeting ended quickly. Across the small fleet, humans began preparing for war. They loaded weapons and checked systems. They said goodbye to families through video calls. They wrote letters that might never be sent. 3 hours later, 12 human warships jumped into hyperspace, heading toward a battle they knew nothing about. They were going to help people they had never met fight an enemy they had never seen. For most species in the galaxy, this would seem crazy. For humans, it was just another Tuesday, far away. Commander Vextari watched another of his ships die under Korath guns. He did not know that help was coming. He did not know that somewhere in the dark between stars, 12 ships full of humans were racing toward his world. He did not know that everything was about to change. 3 days later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zalani system. What they saw made even the veteran crews stop and stare. The space around the alien planet was full of burning ships and floating debris. Red vessels moved between the wreckage like sharks hunting in bloody water. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Valiant and watched the battle through his main screen. The alien ships were beautiful in a way that human vessels were not. They looked like they were grown instead of built, with smooth curves and glowing crystal parts, but they were dying fast under the guns of their enemies. "My God," whispered his tactical officer, Lieutenant Dan Murphy. Look at the size of that Koroth fleet. Morrison counted the red ships on his scanner. Over 150 vessels, most of them bigger than anything in his fleet. The Koroth ships looked like weapons even when they were not firing. Sharp edges and heavy armored plates covered every surface. Spikes and gun barrels stuck out in all directions. Captain Hayes, Morrison called over the communication system. Take your ship and try to contact the defenders. Let them know we are here to help. Yes, sir. The UES Reaper moved forward slowly, its weapons powered down to show peaceful intent. Captain Lisa Hayes was good at this kind of work. She had spent years talking to alien traders and diplomats. But this was different. This was war. Unknown vessels. Hayes broadcast on all frequencies. This is Captain Hayes of the human ship Reaper. We received your distress call. We are here to help. For several minutes, there was no answer. Then, a weak signal came through the static. Human ship. This is Commander Vextari of the Zalani Defense Force. Did you say human? We do not know this species. Hayes looked at her communication officer, a young man named Pete Williams. He shrugged and switched to the computer translator. Commander Vextari, we are from a system called Sol. We heard your call for help. What is your situation? Bad, came the reply. Very bad. We have lost most of our fleet. The Koroth will break through our last defenses soon. How many ships do you have? Hayes looked at her captain's screen, which showed all 12 human vessels. Compared to the massive Koroth fleet, they looked tiny. 12 ships, Commander. There was a long pause. When Vextari spoke again, his voice sounded sad. I thank you for coming, but 12 ships cannot stop the Koroth Empire. You should leave before they notice you. We did not come here to leave, Hayes replied. Tell us about the enemy. While Hayes talked to the alien commander, the other human ships spread out in a defensive formation. Each captain studied the Koroth vessels through their sensors, looking for weaknesses. The enemy ships were big and heavily armed, but they moved slowly. Their weapons were powerful, but had limited range compared to human guns. Admiral Morrison listened to the conversation between Hayes and the alien commander. The more he heard, the more interested he became. The Koroth Empire sounded like every bully humanity had ever faced, just bigger and meaner. Captain Chen, Morrison called to the UES Devastator. What do your sensors tell you about these Koroth ships? Tony Chen was Morrison's best tactical officer. He had fought in the Mars Rebellion and the Jupiter mining wars. He knew ships and weapons better than anyone in the fleet. Heavy armor, sir, but old design. Their shields are strong in front, but weak on the sides. They rely on fear and superior numbers. I think they have never fought anyone who could hit back hard. Interesting. What about their weapons? Plasma cannons mostly. Very destructive but slow to recharge. If we can make them waste their first shots, we can move in close before they can fire again? Morrison nodded. Human ships were built for close combat. They had learned to fight that way during the asteroid wars, when battles happened inside mining fields where long-range weapons were useless. Commander Vextari's voice came through the speakers again. Captain Hayes, I must ask about your species. The Galactic database has no record of humans. Where do you come from? Hayes looked at Morrison for guidance. The Admiral nodded. We come from a planet called Earth. It is far from here, outside what you probably call civilized space. What kind of world is Earth? Hayes paused. How do you explain Earth to someone who had never seen a death world? It is challenging. We have predators, natural disasters, disease, extreme weather. Our planet has tried to kill us for millions of years. That sounds terrible. How do you survive? We learn to fight back. On the other end of the communication, Commander Vextari was talking to his science officer. The Zalani had devices that could scan the human ships, and what they found confused them. The human vessels were covered in thick armor plating, Their weapons were designed for maximum damage at close range. Most strange of all, the ships had areas that looked like they were built to be repaired during battle. Captain Hayes, Vextari said slowly, "Our sensors show that your ships are very heavily armed. Are humans a warrior species?" Hayes thought about that question. Humans did not think of themselves as warriors. Exactly. They thought of themselves as survivors. We are a species that has learned to protect what we care about. But 12 ships against the entire Korath fleet, it is impossible. Commander Hayes said, and her voice became hard like steel. Humans do not believe in impossible. We believe in necessary. While this conversation continued, something else was happening. The Korath had noticed the human ships. A group of red vessels turned away from their attack on the planet and began moving toward the newcomers. Their leader was a massive battleship called the Bloodfang. Warlord Grast stood on the bridge of his flagship and studied the strange new ships. They were smaller than his vessels, but seemed well armed. More importantly, they were in his way. "What species are these?" he asked his intelligence officer. "Unknown, my lord. They call themselves humans. Our database has no information about them." Grazeth laughed, a sound like metal scraping against stone. "Another weak species trying to play. Hero, send the fast strike squadron to destroy them. Make it quick." 20 Korath ships broke away from the main fleet and headed toward the humans at high speed. They were smaller than the battleships, but still twice the size of human vessels. Their hulls were painted with symbols that meant death and conquest. In the Korath language, Admiral Morrison watched them coming on his tactical display. "All ships, this is Morrison. Looks like we are about to meet the neighbors. Remember your training. Fight smart, fight hard, and protect each other." Captain Amy Foster of the EU's Thunderbolt was the first to respond. "Admiral, should we try to talk to them first?" "Negative. These are not people who talk. Look at their ship names on the scanner. Bone Crusher, Planet Killer, Widowmaker. These are people who only understand one language." The Korath squadron spread out as they approached, trying to surround the human ships. It was a standard tactic that had worked against dozens of other species. Big ships with big guns could usually scare smaller opponents into surrender, but the human ships did not run. Instead, they moved closer together, forming a tight formation that protected each vessel's weak spots. Their weapons powered up, and their shields strengthened. Captain Lisa Hayes watched the enemy ships approach and felt something she had not felt in years. It was not fear, exactly. It was the feeling a human gets when cornered by something bigger and meaner. It was the feeling that had kept humanity alive on a world full of things that wanted to eat them. "All human ships," Hayes broadcast, "prepare for combat. Show them what happens when you threaten innocent people in front of a human." The Korath squadron commander, a warrior named Skurdash, was confident as he approached the strange ships. He had destroyed dozens of alien vessels in his career. These would be no different. He was about to learn that humans were very different indeed. The first exchange of fire happened when the two fleets were still far apart. The Korath ships opened fire with their massive plasma cannons, sending streams of superheated gas toward the human vessels. The shots were powerful enough to vaporize a city block, but the human ships were not where the Korath expected them to be. As soon as the enemy weapons fired, the human vessels scattered like leaves in a storm. They moved in ways that seemed impossible, twisting and turning with an agility that their size should not have allowed. "How are they moving like that?" Skir demanded. His tactical officer studied the sensor readings. "Sir, their ships appear to be built for this kind of combat. They have attitude thrusters all over their hulls, and their pilots. They are reacting faster than should be possible." The human pilots were reacting fast because they had trained for this their entire lives. Every human child grew up playing games that taught them to dodge and weave through dangerous obstacles. Every human pilot had learned to fly in asteroid fields and storm systems that would kill most aliens. As the Korath ships struggled to reload their heavy weapons, the human ships closed distance rapidly. When they were close enough, they opened fire with everything they had. Human weapons were different from most galactic technology. Where other species used energy beams or plasma bursts, humans used solid projectiles fired at incredible speeds. Railguns and mass drivers that could punch through any armor. Missiles that could think for themselves and find their targets. The Korath learned something new that day. They learned what it felt like to be outgunned. "Sir," Vextaria's tactical officer called out from her station. "Look at this. The human ships are tearing through the Korath squadron." Commander Vextari watched in amazement as the small human fleet engaged 20 larger enemy ships and began winning. The human vessels moved like fighters instead of battleships, darting in and out of weapon range while delivering devastating attacks. "This is impossible," he whispered. "How are they doing this?" His science officer checked her readings 3 times before answering. "Sir, I think these humans come from a very dangerous world. Their ships are built like nothing I have ever seen, and their crews, they fight like they have nothing to lose." On the UES Reaper, Captain Hayes watched her weapons officer put 3 railgun rounds through a Korath cruiser's engine section. The enemy ship exploded in a ball of fire and twisted metal. "Target destroyed," reported weapons officer Steve Collins, moving to next target. "Good work, Steve. All ships, keep moving. Do not let them pin you down." The battle continued for 20 minutes. When it was over, 15 Korath ships were destroyed or disabled. The remaining 5 fled back to their main fleet with damage reports that would change everything. Warlord Grazeth listened to the survivors' reports with growing disbelief. 20 ships had been defeated by 12 smaller vessels. Worse, the humans had lost no ships at all. "Bring me everything we know about these humans," he commanded. "My lord, we know almost nothing. They claim to come from outside civilized space." "Then find out more, and prepare the main fleet for battle. It seems we have found a species that knows how to fight." Back on the EU's Valiant, Admiral Morrison reviewed the battle reports with satisfaction. His people had performed well. But he knew this was just the beginning. "Captain Hayes," he called over the communicator. "Resume contact with the Zilani commander. I think he might want to hear what we have to say now." Commander Vextari's voice came through clearer now, filled with amazement and hope. "Captain Hayes, that was ... incredible. How did you defeat so many Korath ships?" "Practice," Hayes replied simply. "Commander, we need to talk. The main Korath fleet will not be so easy to handle. We need to work together if we are going to save your people." "Yes," Vextari said, and for the first time in days, he sounded like he believed they might actually survive. "Yes, let us talk about how to fight these monsters." Admiral Morrison smiled as he listened to the conversation. The real battle was just beginning, but humanity had made its first impression on the galaxy. It was a good one. Warlord Grast was angry. He stood in his command center aboard the Bloodfang and listened to the reports from his surviving squadron leaders. 20 ships destroyed by 12 smaller vessels. It was impossible, but the wreckage floating in space proved it was true. "Show me these humans again," he commanded. The main screen displayed images of the human ships taken during the battle. They looked nothing like proper warships, where Korath vessels were built to inspire fear with their size and spikes. Human ships looked practical, like tools made for a specific job. "They fight like cowards," complained Squadron Leader Bone Ripper. "They run and hide, instead of meeting us in honorable combat." Grast studied the battle recordings. The human ships moved in ways that seemed wrong. They twisted and spun through space, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted properly. Their weapons fired from strange angles, hitting Korath ships in spots where armor was weakest. "This is not cowardice," Grasp said slowly. This is something else. They fight like ... like hunters. Meanwhile, on the EU's Valiant, Admiral Morrison was meeting with his ship captains through video connection. They needed to plan their next move carefully. The Korath main fleet was still over 100 ships strong. Report on enemy capabilities, Morrison ordered. Captain Tony Chen pulled up tactical data on his screen. Sir, the Korath ships are powerful, but predictable. They rely on fear tactics and overwhelming firepower. Their armor is thick, but their maneuverability is poor. Most importantly, they do not seem to have experience fighting an enemy that can fight back effectively. What about their weapons? Heavy plasma cannons with long reload times. Energy shields that are strong but drain power quickly. They are built for short, decisive battles against weaker opponents. Morrison nodded. This matched what he had expected. Most galactic species seem to fight wars like sporting events, with rules and honor codes. Humans fought wars like natural disasters, total, relentless, and focused only on winning. Captain Hayes, Morrison said, what did you learn from talking to the Zilani commander? Lisa Hayes consulted her notes. Sir, the Zilani are a peaceful species. They have not fought a real war in over 1,000 years. Their weapons are designed for defense only. They have never seen anything like Korath tactics. And the Korath, according to Commander Vextari, they are a conquest species. They take over systems, enslave the populations, and strip the planets of resources. They have conquered 47 different species over the past 3 centuries. Morrison felt a familiar coldness settle in his chest. It was the same feeling he had gotten during the Mars Rebellion, when corporate armies had tried to starve out the mining colonies. Some fights were not about territory or resources. Some fights were about stopping bullies who hurt innocent people. Sir, Captain Amy Foster spoke up from her screen. The Zilani commander wants to coordinate our attacks with his remaining ships. Should we agree? Negative? The Zilani fight like civilized people. They try to disable enemy ships instead of destroying them. They aim for weapons and engines, not crew compartments. That will not work against the Korath. Then, what do we do? Morrison pulled up a star chart showing the Zilani system. The planet was surrounded by debris fields from destroyed ships. The Korath fleet was in orbit, preparing for a final assault on the surface. We implement the Deathworld doctrine, Morrison said. The ship captains looked at each other with understanding. They all knew what that meant. The Deathworld doctrine was humanity's approach to warfare, developed over millions of years of survival on a planet that was actively trying to kill them. The doctrine was simple. Assume every enemy is trying to make your species extinct, because on Earth, that was usually true. Fight with everything you have, because losing means death for everyone you care about. Use every advantage, break every rule, and never stop until the threat is completely eliminated. Colonel Parker, Morrison called to his Marine commander, prepare your boarding teams. We are going to teach the Korath what happens when they threaten civilians in front of humans. Colonel Ryan Parker appeared on screen from the UES Devastator. He was a big man with scars on his face and hands that spoke of many battles. Behind him, Morrison could see Marines checking their weapons and armor. Sir, how many ships do you want us to take? All of them, Colonel. Every Korath ship in this system. Parker smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. Yes, sir. My people are ready. The human fleet began moving toward the Korath formation. They did not charge straight in like the Zilani had done. Instead, they approached from multiple directions, using the debris fields for cover. Each ship took a different path, making it impossible for the Korath to focus their fire. Warlord Graste watched the approaching human ships with growing unease. This was not how space battles were supposed to work. Fleets were supposed to line up and exchange fire until one side surrendered or was destroyed. These humans were moving like a pack of wild animals stalking prey. All ships, prepare for battle, Grazeth commanded. Show these creatures what happens when they challenge the Korath Empire. The first exchange of fire began when the fleets were still far apart. The Korath opened up with everything they had, filling space with plasma fire and energy beams. It was an impressive display of firepower that should have vaporized any attacking force. But the human ships were not where the Korath were aiming. They had scattered again, using tactics that seemed to come from some deep instinct for survival. Each human vessel moved independently, but they all worked together like parts of a single organism. Captain Beth Williams of the UES Reaper found herself flying through a field of burning debris, using the wreckage of Zalani ships as cover. Her weapons officer, Lieutenant Dan Murphy, tracked targets through the smoke and fire. Enemy cruiser, bearing 27 Mark V, Murphy reported, ranged 4,000 kilometers. Take us in close, Williams ordered. All weapons, prepare for close-range engagement. The Reaper dove toward the Korath cruiser like a bird of prey. The enemy ship was 3 times her size, but Williams had learned to fight in the asteroid fields around Mars. Size did not matter if you could not hit your target Korath. Plasma cannons fired all around her ship, but the beams passed harmlessly through empty space. Williams brought her ship so close to the enemy vessel that their shields were almost touching. At that range, Korath weapons could not track fast enough to hit her. Fire everything, Williams commanded. The Reaper's weapons fired at point-blank range. Railgun rounds punched through the Korath ship's armor like paper. Missiles found their way into engine compartments and weapons bays. In 30 seconds, the enemy cruiser was a drifting hulk. Target destroyed, Murphy reported. Moving to next target. Across the battlefield, similar scenes were playing out. Human ships danced through Korath formations, striking fast and hard before disappearing back into the debris fields. The enemy had superior numbers and firepower, but they could not bring those advantages to bear against opponents who refused to fight fair. Commander Vextari watched the battle from his command ship and felt amazement mixed with horror. The humans fought with a savagery that was shocking even in wartime. They did not just disable enemy ships, they destroyed them completely. When Korath vessels tried to surrender, the humans ignored the signals and kept firing. Sir, his tactical officer said, the humans are not following standard combat protocols. They are targeting crew compartments and life support systems. I can see that, Vextari replied. But why? I think, his science officer said quietly, they are not fighting to win territory or gain honor. They are fighting to eliminate a threat completely. On the UES Devastator, Colonel Parker was preparing for the most dangerous part of the operation. His transport ships were loaded with Marines, wearing powered armor and carrying weapons that most galactic species would consider excessive for ship-to-ship combat. Listen up, Parker told his troops over the communication system. We are going to board Korath ships and take them from the inside. These are not civilized opponents. They are predators who kill civilians for fun. Remember your training, watch your teammates' backs, and show them what happens when they mess with innocent people. The first boarding action began when the UES Thunderbolt managed to dock with a damaged Korath battleship. Captain Amy Foster used her ship's cutting tools to burn through the enemy's hull, creating an opening for Parker's Marines. The Korath had never experienced human boarding tactics. Most galactic species conducted boarding actions like police raids, controlled, careful, with lots of warnings and opportunities for surrender. Humans conducted boarding actions like natural disasters. Sergeant Jake Thompson was the first Marine through the breach. He wore armor that could stop plasma fire and carried a weapon that fired explosive rounds. Behind him came 20 more Marines, all moving with the coordinated precision of a pack of wolves. The Korath warriors they encountered were shocked by what they saw. These humans were smaller than Korath soldiers, but they moved faster and hit harder. Their weapons were designed to kill quickly and efficiently. Most disturbing of all, they showed no fear. Surrender and you will be treated according to galactic law, Thompson called out, in the Korath language. His suit's computer had learned the words from captured communications. The Korath commander laughed and raised his weapon. Weak creatures, we do not surrender to prey. Thompson's response was immediate and final. His weapon fired once, and the Korath commander became a memory. Anyone else want to test us? Thompson asked the remaining Korath soldiers. They looked at their dead leader, then at the humans in their advanced armor carrying weapons that could punch holes in bulkheads. Several of them dropped their weapons. Smart choice, Thompson said. Secure the ship. Similar scenes played out across the battlefield as human marines took control of one Korath vessel after another. Each boarding action was swift and decisive. The humans did not waste time with lengthy negotiations or honor duels. They presented simple choices: surrender or die. Warlord Grast watched his fleet being systematically destroyed and could not understand what was happening. His warriors were the finest in the galaxy. They had conquered dozens of species. How were they being beaten by 12 small ships? My lord, his intelligence officer called out, I am receiving reports from the boarding actions. The humans, they fight like demons. What do you mean? They show no mercy to those who resist, but they protect prisoners who surrender. They move through our ships like they were born for this kind of fighting. And sir, they seem to enjoy it. Grazeth felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not fear of death in battle. That was honorable. Fear of something alien and wrong. These humans fought with a joy that seemed unnatural. On the EU's valiant Admiral Morrison watched the battle progress with satisfaction. His people were performing exactly as he had expected. They had learned warfare in the hardest school in the galaxy, survival on a death world that was constantly trying to kill them. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we have disabled or captured 37 enemy vessels. The remaining Korath ships are beginning to retreat. Morrison nodded. Let them go, but not all of them. Sir, take prisoners from each ship we capture. I want to have a conversation with some Korath leaders. They need to understand something important. An hour later, the battle was over. The Korath fleet had been destroyed or scattered. Warlord Grast himself was a prisoner aboard the UES Devastator, sitting in a holding cell designed for beings much larger than humans. Admiral Morrison came to visit him personally. The human was smaller than Grast and looked fragile compared to Korath armor. But there was something in his eyes that made the warlord uncomfortable. I am Admiral Morrison, the human said. I wanted to explain something to you. You have won this battle, human. But the Korath Empire will send more ships. You cannot fight our entire military. Morrison sat down across from his prisoner. That is where you are wrong. We can fight your entire military. Do you know why? Grazeth said nothing. Because we come from a world that spent millions of years trying to kill us. We learned to fight against impossible odds because losing meant extinction. We learned to use every advantage because our planet never gave us any. And we learned that when someone threatens innocent people, you do not just defeat them. You make sure they can never threaten anyone again. Morrison stood up to leave. Your empire has 48 hours to withdraw from Zalani space and release all the civilians you have captured. If you do not, we will visit every Korath world and show your people what it means to fight a death world species. As Morrison walked away, Grazeth called after him. What kind of monsters are you? Morrison paused at the door. We are not monsters. We are humans, and we are very good at protecting the things we care about. The message was sent to the Korath homeworld within hours. For the first time in their history, the Korath Empire had encountered a species that was more dangerous than they were. The galaxy was about to change. The Korath High Command received Admiral Morrison's message while they were meeting in their great war room on the homeworld. The chamber was built inside a mountain and decorated with trophies from 47 conquered species. Weapons, flags, and skulls covered the walls like a museum of death. Supreme Warlord Kethmori read the human transmission 3 times before speaking. He was the largest Korath alive, with scars covering his red shell, like a map of old battles. Around the table sat his generals, each one a veteran of countless conquests. These humans demand we leave Zalani's space, Kethmori said. They give us 48 hours. General Scartooth laughed, a sound like grinding metal. 12 ships demand the surrender of our entire empire. What madness is this? The same madness that destroyed Warlord Grazeth's fleet, replied General Bloodclaw. We lost over 60 ships to these creatures. Our best warriors are dead or captured. Kethmori studied reports from the battle. The descriptions seemed impossible. Human ships moving like living things. Human soldiers fighting with weapons that could crack starship armor. Human tactics that ignored every rule of civilized warfare. What do we know about their homeworld? He asked. Intelligence Chief Minddripper consulted his datapad. They call it Earth. Long-range scans show it is a Class 12 death world. Such planets are considered impossible for sapient life. Yet they live there. More than that, Supreme Leader, they evolved there. Our scientists believe these humans spent millions of years fighting for survival against their own planet. Everything on Earth seems designed to kill them. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, extreme weather. Kethmori felt a chill run through his armored body. The Korath homeworld was a pleasant place, with mild weather and few dangerous animals. His people had become warriors by choice, not necessity. How many humans are there? Unknown, but estimates suggest billions. They have spread to multiple star systems and built military bases throughout their territory. The room fell silent. Billions of creatures who had learned warfare from a planet that was actively trying to kill them. The thought was terrifying. We will not yield to threats, Kethmori declared. Send the second armada to Zalani's space. 500 ships should be enough to crush these humans. But General Bloodclaw shook his head. Supreme Leader, I suggest caution. These humans fight differently than anyone we have faced. Perhaps we should study them more before committing so many resources. Are you suggesting we show weakness to these creatures? I am suggesting we learn why they defeated our best fleet with only 12 ships. Far away in human space, word of the Zalani battle was spreading quickly. Captain Kate Robinson was commanding a patrol near the outer colonies when she received an emergency transmission from Fleet Command. All ships, this is Admiral Chen at Terra Base. The 7th Fleet has engaged hostile aliens in the Zalani system. They are requesting immediate reinforcement. Robinson looked at her tactical officer, Lieutenant Mike Davis. They had both served in the Outer Colony Wars and knew what that meant. When a human fleet asked for help, it meant they were facing something serious. How many ships are available? Robinson asked over the communication system. 37 vessels from various fleets, Captain. All volunteers. Robinson smiled. Humans had a rule about volunteers. When innocent people needed help, there were always volunteers. Count us in, Admiral. When do we leave? 4 hours. And Captain, bring everything. Reports say these Korath are tough. Across human space, similar conversations were happening on dozens of ships. The news spread through social networks and military channels. A peaceful alien species was being destroyed by an aggressive empire. Humans were going to help in the Zalani system. Admiral Morrison was preparing for the next phase of operations. His small fleet had secured the orbital space around the alien planet, but Korath ground forces were still attacking civilian populations on the surface. Colonel Parker, Morrison called over the communication system. How are the surface operations going? Ryan Parker's voice came through with the sound of explosions in the background. Sir, we have secured 3 major cities and are moving toward the capital. But these Korath ground troops are different from their navy. They fight like animals. Morrison was not surprised. Most species became more civilized as they developed technology. Humans had become more dangerous. What kind of resistance are you facing? Heavy, sir. The Korath have been using civilian buildings as fortifications. They seem to think we will not attack if innocents might be hurt. Show them they are wrong, Colonel. Carefully, but show them. On the planet's surface, Lieutenant Dan Murphy was leading a squad of Marines through the ruins of what had been a beautiful Zalani city. The crystal towers were broken and burning. Bodies lay in the streets, mostly aliens with blue skin and gentle faces who had never hurt anyone. Murphy's squad moved carefully through the rubble, their armor sensors searching for enemy positions. They found a group of Korath soldiers holding Zalani civilians hostage in a school building. "This is Lieutenant Murphy of the human military," he announced over loudspeakers. "Release the civilians and surrender. You have 30 seconds. The Korath commander replied by shooting one of the hostages. Murphy felt something cold settle in his chest. It was the same feeling his ancestors had gotten when predators threatened their children. It was the feeling that had kept humanity alive for millions of years. "Marines," Murphy said quietly, "remember what we learned in urban combat training. Precision shots only. Protect the innocents." What followed was a textbook example of human military efficiency, using sensors that could see through walls and weapons that could hit targets with pinpoint accuracy. Murphy's team eliminated every Korath soldier in the building within 3 minutes. Not one civilian was harmed. Similar operations were happening across the planet. Human soldiers were teaching the Korath something important. Using innocent people as shields did not work against a species that had learned to hunt predators on a death world back in space. Commander Vextari was trying to understand what he had witnessed. His people had been fighting the Korath for weeks and losing badly. The humans had arrived and turned the entire war around in less than a day. "Captain Hayes," he called over the communication system, "I must ask you something." Lisa Hayes responded, from the bridge of the UES Reaper. "Go ahead, Commander. Your people fight with a skill I have never seen. But more than that, you fight with ... passion." As if this was personal, Hayes was quiet for a moment. "How do you explain to a peaceful species why humans react so strongly to bullies?" "Commander, my people have a saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We do not like doing nothing, but you barely know us. Why risk your lives for strangers? Because you called for help, and no one else came." Vextari felt something warm spread through his chest. In all his years of studying galactic politics, he had never encountered a species that would fight so hard for people they had just met. 3 days later, the second Korath armada arrived at the edge of the Zalani system. 500 warships. The largest military force the Korath Empire had ever assembled. Supreme Warlord Kethmori himself commanded the fleet from his massive dreadnought. The World Eater. What they found waiting for them made even the veteran Korath warriors pause in surprise. The human fleet had grown from 12 ships to 49. More importantly, these were not the small patrol vessels that had defeated the first Korath attack. These were human battleships, cruisers, and carriers, the heavy warships of a species that had learned to build for war. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the UES Defiant, and watched the Korath fleet approach. Beside him stood Admiral Sarah Brooks, who had arrived with the reinforcements from human space. "That is a lot of ships," Brooks observed. Double quotes. "Yes, it is," Morrison replied. "But they are still thinking like conquerors. We are thinking like protectors." On the World Eater, Kethmori studied the human formation with growing unease. The new ships were larger than the original 12, but they maintained the same aggressive design philosophy. Angular holes covered in weapons and armor. No decoration. No unnecessary features. Just tools, built for killing. Communications, Cathmori commanded. Send a message to the human fleet. The transmission reached Admiral Morrison a few minutes later. Human Commander, this is Supreme Warlord Cathmori of the Korath Empire. You are outnumbered 10-1. Surrender now, and we will allow you to leave this system alive. Morrison's response was immediate. Warlord Cathmori, this is Admiral Morrison of the Human Defense Force. You have invaded the territory of a peaceful species and killed innocent civilians. You have 5 minutes to withdraw your forces, or we will withdraw them for you. Cathmori laughed. With 49 ships against 500, your species must be insane. No, Morrison replied. We are just very good at math. 49 human ships times the experience of fighting on a death world for millions of years equals 1 dead Korath fleet. The battle that followed became known as the Battle of Zalani Prime, and it changed galactic warfare forever. The humans did not charge into the enemy formation like heroes from ancient stories. Instead, they implemented something they called the hammer and anvil strategy. Half the human fleet, commanded by Admiral Brooks, positioned themselves between the Korath Armada and the planet. They formed a defensive line and waited. The other half, led by Morrison, disappeared into the asteroid field at the edge of the system. Cathmori saw the human deployment and smiled. The creatures were splitting their forces, making themselves even weaker. All ships, attack the human defensive line. Crush them quickly. The Korath fleet charged forward in a massive wave of red ships and blazing weapons. It was an impressive sight that should have terrified any opponent. But the humans had learned something during their evolution. When something big and scary charges at you, sometimes the best strategy is to let it come. Admiral Brooks waited until the Korath ships were committed to their attack before giving her order. All ships, execute Deathworld Protocol 7. The human defensive line suddenly scattered in all directions. Ships that had been sitting still exploded into motion, moving with an agility that seemed impossible for vessels their size. The Korath charge found itself attacking empty space. At the same moment, Morrison's force emerged from the asteroid field behind the Korath fleet. They had used the rocks and ice to mask their approach, a tactic learned from hunting dangerous prey on Earth. All ships, Morrison commanded, target enemy engines and command structures. Make this quick. The Korath fleet found itself caught between 2 forces of human ships, both attacking from unexpected directions. Worse, the humans were using weapons and tactics that the Korath had never seen before. Human ships fired missiles that could think for themselves, seeking out the weakest points in enemy armor. They used railguns that accelerated projectiles to incredible speeds, punching through Korath shields like they were not there. Most devastating of all, they coordinated their attacks with a precision that spoke of countless hours of practice. Captain Beth Williams found herself commanding a squadron of 6 human cruisers against a formation of 30 Korath battleships. By every rule of warfare, she should have been destroyed quickly. Instead, she led her ships in a complex dance through the enemy formation, striking fast and hard before disappearing back into the chaos of battle. Target the big one, Williams ordered her weapons officer, pointing at a massive Korath dreadnought. All ships, concentrate fire on that command ship. 6 human vessels opened fire simultaneously. Their combined firepower was focused on a single point of the enemy ship's hull. Korath armor that could withstand plasma fire from dozens of ships cracked and failed under the precise assault of human weapons. The dreadnought broke apart in a spectacular explosion that lit up half the battlefield. Supreme Warlord Cathmori watched his fleet being systematically destroyed and finally understood what his people were facing. These humans did not fight for conquest or glory. They fought with the desperate efficiency of a species that had learned warfare from survival itself. All ships, retreat, he commanded. Fall back to the hyperspace jump point. But Admiral Morrison had anticipated this. Human ships were already positioned to cut off the Korath escape routes. The aliens found themselves trapped in a system they had come to conquer, surrounded by an enemy that refused to let them leave. "This is Admiral Morrison to all Korath vessels," came the transmission. "Shut down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any ship that attempts to escape will be destroyed." Kethmori looked around his bridge at the faces of his officers. They were all thinking the same thing. How had 12 human ships become 49? How had 49 ships defeated 500? The answer was simple, though the Korath would never fully understand it. Humans had evolved on a world where cooperation meant survival. When one human called for help, others came. When innocent people were threatened, humans united. The Korath Empire had picked a fight with a species that viewed the protection of others as a moral imperative. They had challenged beings who had learned warfare from a planet that was constantly trying to kill them. It was the worst mistake they had ever made. As the last Korath ships surrendered, Admiral Morrison opened a communication channel to the human fleet. "All ships, well done. Prepare for occupation duties. We have a lot of cleanup work to do." On the planet below, Zilani civilians emerged from their hiding places to see human soldiers distributing food and medical supplies. Children who had never seen an alien before watched in wonder as humans worked to repair their damaged cities. Commander Vextari stood in his command center and tried to process what had happened. In less than a week, these humans had saved his entire species from extinction. They had defeated the most feared empire in the galaxy with tactics and weapons that seemed to come from some ancient time, when warfare was about survival instead of politics. "Captain Hayes," he called over the communication system, "I have a question." "Go ahead, Commander. What happens now? Will your people stay to govern us? Will you demand tribute or territory?" Hayes was quiet for a long moment. "Commander, we are going to help you rebuild. Then we are going to make sure this never happens again. And then we are going home. That is all. That is all. We did not come here to conquer anyone. We came here because you needed help." Vextari felt tears running down his blue cheeks. In a galaxy full of predators and conquerors, humanity had appeared like a guardian angel. They asked for nothing, except the chance to protect the innocent. The galaxy was indeed changing, and for the first time in centuries, it was changing for the better. 6 months after the Battle of Zilani Prime, the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. News of humanity's victory had spread across thousands of star systems, carrying with it stories that seemed too incredible to believe. A species from outside civilized space had defeated the Korath Empire using only 49 ships. On the Zilani homeworld, the rebuilding was nearly complete. Human engineers worked alongside Zilani architects to repair the crystal towers that had been damaged in the invasion. The designs were better than before, stronger, more beautiful, and protected by defensive systems that could stop any future attack. Commander Vextari, now promoted to Admiral of the Zilani Defense Force, stood in his new command center and watched human ships patrolling the outer system. They moved with the same deadly grace he had witnessed during the battle, but now they were protectors instead of attackers. "Admiral," his communications officer called out, "we are receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council." Vex sighed. The Council had been trying to contact him for weeks, ever since word of the human intervention had reached the core worlds. They wanted to know everything about these new beings who had appeared from nowhere and changed the balance of power in the galaxy. "Put them through," he said. The main screen filled with the image of Counselor Murfak, a tall being with silver skin and too many eyes. Behind him sat representatives from dozens of species, all looking nervous and excited. "Admiral Murfak began, in the formal tone used for official business. "The Council requires a full report on the species calling themselves humans. We understand they were instrumental in your defense against the Korath Empire." "Instrumental is a small word for what they did," Vextari replied. "They saved us from extinction. Yes, we have heard the stories. 12 ships defeating an entire Korath fleet, 49 ships destroying 500 B's reports seem, ... Exaggerated. Vextari smiled. Counselor, I was there. If anything, the reports are too modest. The humans fought with a skill and determination I have never seen. They risked their lives for people they had never met, asking nothing in return. Another counselor, a plant-like being with purple leaves, leaned forward. Admiral, we have analyzed the battle recordings. Human tactics appear to violate several principles of civilized warfare. They target command structures directly. They board enemy vessels with excessive force. They show no mercy to those who threaten civilians. And thank the stars they do. Vextari said firmly. The Korath understand only strength. Civilized warfare does not work against creatures who kill for pleasure. Meanwhile, on the UES Defiant, Admiral Morrison was having his own conversation with human leadership. The screen in his ready room showed Admiral Chen from Terra Base, along with several other fleet commanders and government officials. Jack, Admiral Chen said, you have started something big out there. We are getting requests for help from a dozen different systems. Everyone wants human protection now. Morrison rubbed his tired eyes. The past 6 months had been busy ones. I know, Admiral. The question is, what do we do about it? The President wants your opinion. You have the most experience dealing with these alien species. Morrison thought about Commander Vextari and the other Zilani he had met. Good people who had been attacked by bullies simply because they were weak. Then he thought about the reports coming in from across the galaxy, other peaceful species living in fear of aggressive empires. Sir, Morrison said, I think we have a responsibility here. We have the power to protect people who cannot protect themselves. My father always taught me that with power comes obligation, even if it means committing our military forces across half the galaxy, especially then. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent message from Captain Kate Robinson, who was commanding the patrol fleet in nearby space. Admiral Morrison, we are receiving multiple distress signals. 3 different systems are under attack by something called the Vaxxan Confederacy. Morrison looked at Admiral Chen. Sir, go, Chen said simply. Take whatever ships you need. We will figure out the politics later. An hour later, the human fleet was jumping to hyperspace again, heading toward another battle to protect another group of innocent people. It was becoming a pattern, and Morrison was beginning to understand that this was humanity's new role in the galaxy. On the former Korath homeworld, Supreme Warlord Kethmori sat in a prison cell and tried to understand how his empire had fallen so quickly. The cell was comfortable by human standards. They did not believe in unnecessary cruelty, but it was still a prison. The door opened, and Admiral Morrison entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He offered one to the former warlord. I do not understand your customs, Kethmori said, accepting the drink. It is called hospitality, Morrison replied, sitting down across from his prisoner. We treat our guests well, even former enemies. Is that why you have not executed me? Morrison shook his head. We do not execute prisoners of war. That would make us no better than the people we fight against. Kethmori studied the human's face. Your species confuses me, Admiral. You fight with a savagery that would shame the Korath, but you show mercy to defeated enemies. You destroy our fleets but rebuild our worlds. What do you want from us? We want you to stop hurting innocent people, Morrison said simply. The Korath are strong and brave. Those are good qualities. But you have been using them to take what belongs to others. We want you to use them to protect instead of destroy. And if we refuse... Morrison's expression hardened. Then we will stop you. Every time, in every system, until you learn. Kethmori drank his coffee and considered this. You would police the entire galaxy, if necessary. That is impossible. You do not have enough ships or people. Morrison smiled. A year ago, we had 12 ships in this sector. Today, We have over 100. Humans do not like bullies, Warlord. When word spreads that innocent people need protection, more of us always come. As if to prove his point, Morrison's communicator chimed with an incoming message. Admiral, this is Captain Davis from the EU's Vigilant. We just received word that the Vaxan Confederacy has surrendered. Captain Robinson's fleet convinced them that attacking peaceful colonies was a bad idea. Morrison nodded to his communicator. Casualties, minimal, sir. The Vaxan took one look at our tactical records from the Korath War and decided they would rather negotiate. After the call ended, Morrison looked at Kathmori. You see, the galaxy is learning. 3 years after the first distress call from Zilani space, the Terran Defense Coalition held its first formal meeting. The conference was held on a neutral space station in the Vega system, and representatives from over 50 species attended. Admiral Morrison, now promoted to Fleet Admiral and overall commander of human forces, sat at the main table alongside alien leaders he had come to consider friends. Commander Vextari was there, representing not just the Zilani, but a dozen other species that humans had helped defend. The purpose of this coalition, Morrison announced to the assembled delegates, is simple. No species should live in fear of aggressive neighbors. No civilian population should face extinction because they cannot defend themselves. We are here to make sure that never happens again. Counselor Murthak from the old Galactic Council raised a tentacle. Fleet Admiral, many species are concerned about human military dominance. You now control the most powerful fleet in known space. Morrison nodded. That is a fair concern, Counselor. That is why we are establishing this coalition with formal rules and oversight. Humans will not act unilaterally except in cases of immediate emergency. And what constitutes an emergency? Attacks on civilian populations? Attempts at genocide? The enslavement of sapient beings? The use of weapons of mass destruction against inhabited worlds? Morrison's voice grew hard. The things that require immediate response. A delegate from the Thornery Union stood up. Fleet Admiral, what guarantee do we have that humans will not eventually become conquerors themselves? Power corrupts, as they say. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, thinking of all the battles he had fought and all the people he had saved. Delegate, I cannot give you guarantees about the future. What I can tell you is this. Humans evolved on a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. We learned that survival meant cooperation. We learned that protecting others was the same as protecting ourselves. Those instincts do not change easily. He stood and walked to the large window, showing the stars beyond. But if humans ever become the thing we fight against, I hope someone will be strong enough to stop us. The galaxy needs protectors, not new tyrants. The vote to establish the Terran Defense Coalition passed by an overwhelming margin. For the first time in galactic history, peaceful species had a military force strong enough to protect them from aggressive empires. Captain Kate Robinson stood on the bridge of the newest human ship, the UES Guardian, and watched the ceremony. Through her main screen, her vessel was one of 50 new ships built specifically for coalition service, designed with both human military doctrine and alien technology. Captain, her communications officer called out, we are receiving a distress signal from the Kepler sector. Unknown attackers are hitting merchant vessels. Robinson smiled. It was the same expression Admiral Morrison had worn during that first battle at Zilani Prime, determined, confident, and slightly eager for action. Plot a course for the Kepler sector, she ordered. Maximum speed. Aye, Captain. Should we wait for additional ships? Negative. When someone calls for help, humans answer. That is what we do. As the UES Guardian jumped into hyperspace, Robinson thought about the changes that had swept across the galaxy. The Korath Empire was now a peaceful federation focused on exploration, instead of conquest. The Vaxan Confederacy had become a major trade partner with dozens of systems, species that had lived in fear for centuries. were now building art galleries and universities instead of weapons. The galaxy was not perfect. It probably never would be, but it was safer. Children could grow up without fearing alien invasion. Scientists could study the stars without worrying about their homeworlds being destroyed. Artists could create beauty without wondering if anyone would be alive to appreciate it. And in the dark between the stars, human ships continued their eternal patrol. They moved through space like guardian angels, watching for distress signals and ready to respond. When innocent people called for help, the message was clear to any who would listen. The galaxy now had protectors, who had learned warfare from survival itself. They fought not for conquest or glory, but because they believed that all sapient beings deserved to live free from fear in the end. That made all the difference. Far from the ceremony and speeches, in a small communications post on the edge of human space, a young ensign named Tom Parker was monitoring the deep space channels. He was the nephew of Colonel Ryan Parker, following in his uncle's footsteps of service and protection. A signal came through the static, weak, desperate, and broadcasting on an emergency frequency from a system no human had ever visited. This is ... anyone ... please help. We are ... dying ... Ensign Parker looked at the signal location on his star chart. It was 50 light-years away, far beyond the established patrol routes. It would take a significant force to reach them in time to help. But Parker had been raised on stories of Zalani Prime and the first human intervention. He had learned the most important lesson humanity had to teach. When someone calls for help, you answer. He opened an emergency channel to Fleet Command. This is Deep Space Monitor, Station 7. I have a Code 1 distress signal from unknown coordinates. Requesting immediate response. Within hours, another human fleet would be jumping into hyperspace, carrying with them the promise that had become humanity's gift to the galaxy. No one fights alone. The stars burned on, and humanity continued its watch. In a universe full of darkness, they had chosen to be light. In a galaxy full of predators, they had chosen to be guardians, and that choice had made all the difference.